Yaou is a third-year PhD candidate in musicology at the Department of Music, University of York, supervised by Dr. Ain Shiel. She was awarded a full scholarship by the University of York and a Chinese scholarship and the Chinese Scholarship Council. Her PhD research focuses on the production and reception of the 20th century British opera, particularly Benjamin Britten's chamber opera, The Turn of the Screw. Sounds like a great topic, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, today I'd like to give you the presentation about this topic, Are the Ghosts Real? Attitudes towards the supernatural in Britain's The Turn of the Screw. My presentation will discuss these parts: the ghosts in the novella, the ghosts in the opera, interpretations in productions, and my conclusion. First of all, please allow me to have a brief introduction of this opera. Benjamin Britten composed The Turn of the Screw in 1954, and the libretto was written by Matthew Piper. The story of the libretto was from Henry James' novella with the same name, The Turn of the Screw, and this novella was created in 1898 during the Victorian era. The story is mainly about a governess fight with two ghosts to protect two children. As H.P. Lovecraft said, the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. Supernatural horror often involves embodiments of fear and the unknown, and supernatural horror fiction exists in literature indelibly, like genes in human bodies. In fact, the ghost story has existed since ancient Greece, and it primarily evolved in the Romantic era. In the Victorian era, the ghost story was more widely embraced and flourished during what is regarded as the golden age of the ghost story. Henry James' The Turn of the Screw is one of the best-known ghost stories in literature. It has been adapted numerous times, including a Broadway play, a chamber opera, The Turn of the Screw by Benjamin Britten, obviously, 2 films, and a mini-series by Netflix in 2020. And Britain's chamber opera, The Turn of the Screw, has constantly performed on stage since the premiere in 1954. So why have people been so obsessed with this ghost story? One of the primary questions concerning to people in this novella is how real the ghosts are. This question leads the story to considerably ambiguity in readers' minds. James created 2 narrators in the novella. The first narrator, who is nameless and only appears in the prologue, describes the scene in an old house where the house guests are gathering and telling ghost stories on Christmas Eve. Then the nameless narrator draws one of the guests, Douglas, forced to tell the story of the governess. The second and principal narrator is the governess. She is the central character of the story, and the story is told from her point of view. The principal narrator and first-person narrative technique lead the interpretations of the story in multiple ways. Are the ghosts real? Is the governess crazy because Henry James designed a horror through the governess' eyes in the novella? With these questions, we can now into the opera. It becomes initially clear through analysis of the libretto that Piper and Benjamin Britten mostly follow the novella's structure, but with some admissions and omissions needed to make the translation from the novella more suited to musical form. For example, there are 2 addition scenes about ghosts, Act 2, Scene 1, Colloquy and Soliloquy, and Act 2, Scene 5, Quint. 2 additional scenes that make Britten and Piper's story debatable. Some critics believe that these are the concrete and straightforward evidence of the interpretations that the ghosts are real, since these 2 scenes directly present the ghosts in the score and libretto. Some critics believe that the additions are further evidence of the governess delusion, but Piper once claims that neither Britten nor I ever intended to interpret the work, only to recreate it for a different medium. Although there are similar ideas between James and Piper, Britten himself has own understanding of the novella The Turn of Screw. He balances the percentage of two interpretations and tried to enhance the ambiguity of the story in his composition. In the period in which Britten was composing the opera, scholars writing about The Turn of Screw tended to focus on psychological analysis. The omissions and admissions of the libretto make the two different interpretations of ghosts are real or the governess is hallucinating applicable and sustained ambiguity in the opera. Let's have a look at the theme of two ghosts. The first one is the musical theme of the female ghost, Miss Jessel. Then is the musical theme of the male ghost, Quint. Okay, due to the limitation of time, I'm going to use Quint's theme as an example. When listening to Quint's theme carefully, one may say the theme is beautiful and meaningful. I agree with this. Quint's theme is quite recognizable. The tone of the theme is A-flat with a soft call when Quint appears, a repeated fast descending melisma, which I believe conveys Quint's desire. Besides, as Christopher Palmer has argued, the major third and minor second arpeggios of the melisma's accompaniment represent gamelan stylization, which is quite exotic. This kind of Oriental or ethno music has a long history in Western culture. It is often to metaphorize something strange, distant, little known, or foreign. And here Britten apparently uses it in his music to suggest feminine charms. As Philip Brett has suggested, the Eastern or Orientalist elements additionally present the character of Quint as blurry, little known, mysterious, I would argue. Now I will turn to examine the details of the premiere production of Britten's The Turn of Screw, which was conducted by Britten himself, and that should revive some insights into Britten's thinking about the work at the time, exploring the production in detail and trying to find out the reception of the interpretations of ghosts really exist or it is the hallucination of the governess at the time. For example, when readers imagine the ghosts in the novella, it is easy for them to believe they are real. Yet when audiences see the characters appear on stage, it is harder for them to believe they are not real. In the premiere production, the creative team uses gauze to metaphorize and create a mysterious atmosphere, which is one of the most remarkable elements of the production. In literature from up to the 19th century, ghosts tended to appear in the form of vapor or smoke. Using gauze across the stage is an effective technique to elude the old castle in the story. Quint's character is in the tower and Miss Jessel's character near the lake. It appears that ghosts are there on stage, but it also appears that they are not quite present since the ghost form are vague. Unfortunately, the premiere production is not available publicly on video, but I have a trailer for you to have a look at the effect of the combination of gauze and musical themes of two ghosts. It's quite spooky, isn't it? To a great extent, the production reflects Britain's music and fundamental ideas. It is obvious that maintaining ambiguity between the ghosts are real and the governess as hallucinating is a main priority for the creative team in the premiere production. In other words, the issue of whether the ghosts are real is crucial. On the other hand, the creative team tries different ways to address the ghost's appearance on stage, while the shape of the ghosts is blurred on the other. For decades, critics couldn't agree on whether or not the governess imagined the ghost in the 10th screw, and it seems that it is impossible to read the story without taking sides and to approach the story critically without knowing where one stands on it. However, with the interpolation of third position, the 10th screw has been seen as a both ghost story and a psychological study. Instead of A or B, that if the ghosts are real, then the governess is insane, or the other way around. Contemporary criticism of the 10th screw tends to say A and B. Several scholars suggested that the story allows both interpretations in reading simultaneously. This A and B view has encouraged several scholars to pay attention to the double directness of the linguistic and psychological indications that James gives his readers. From the 1980s onward, critics increasingly refused to ask questions about diegetic elements of the text, instead acknowledging that many elements simply cannot be known definitely. In the 1980s, focus shifted away from whether the ghosts were real onto how James generated and then sustained the text ambiguity. A study into revisions James made to 2 paragraphs in the novella concluded that James was not striving for clarity, but to create a text which could not be interpreted definitely in either direction. In 2020, Opera North's production seems to have interpreted the story in a special perspective. The creative team focuses on the idea of how powerful the children's secrets are and how the disconnect between how adults' minds work and children's minds work leads to a great confusion and ambiguity. The director Alexandra Talavi claims that he feels there is big difference between the novel and the opera. The opera doesn't quite for me to convey the sense of ambiguity that the novel does so for me. It was because the ghosts are so real in the opera, because they have to sing, they have to say words, while in the novel they just appear. They are more like we have to imagine what they are like, while in the opera they are very flesh and blood. Indeed, the creative team makes an extraordinary blocking and staging in Variation 8 and Act 2, Scene 1, Colloquy and Soliloquy. Quint and Miss Jessel, the male ghost and female ghost, are the primary characters of Act 2, Scene 1, which is an addition to the libretto not contained in James' novella. The director keeps the governess on stage with her back to us, nodding her head and swinging her body, indicating that the governess is asleep. Before Miss Jessel sings, she strokes the governor's back while the music of the strings is twisted and sorrowful. Throughout the duration of dialogue between Quint and Miss Jessel, the governess has been asleep. Let's have a look at the piece of video from Opera North production about this variation 8. So if we look at the score and listening to the music of variation 8, we will find that this variation has two parts. The first part is about Quint's musical theme, and the second part is about Miss Jessel's musical theme. The video I've played for you is the part of Miss Jessel's. The music is full of tritones and minor seconds. The tones are malleable up and down and create the atmosphere of sorrowful mysticism and unreality, as if an unreal creature wanted to grab something but withdraw afterwards. This chord in variation 8 is just like the climax of Miss Jessel's inner conflict between move and withdraw. Then the following arpeggios of harp, which are beautiful and dreamy at first, then suddenly turn to bizarre, indicating the presence of Quint. And Quint is exactly the core of Miss Jessel's conflict. I've watched over 10 productions of this opera, and the majority of them have left the stage of this variation 8 empty. It may be useful in attracting the attention of audience to music, as well as assisting the audience in seeing the figures of two ghosts in their imaginations. However, in the Opera North production, the creativity not only places two ghosts on stage, but also keeps the governess on stage, which gives me a sense that I've been invited not to imagine the ghosts in my mind, not to get entangled in whether the ghosts are real or the governess is dreaming about them, not to get entangled with the interpretations of A or B. Rather, in the Opera North production, the ghosts are in front of your eyes. They are thinking and wondering. They are very real. Meantime, by keeping the governess on stage all times, the stage gives the audience two possibilities to interpret. Real ghosts appear while the governess sleeps, and ghosts exist in the governess' dream. As a result, the interpretations of Opera North production can be A and B. Maybe we consider the reflect that the questionable action of the children are because they are suffering from trauma, whether the trauma comes from the ghosts, the hallucinating governess, or some previous experiences. If the ghosts are real, the children suffer from horrible experiences. If the governess is hallucinating, the children suffer from push and falls from the governess. Both interpretations cause one result, that children are the recipients of trauma. Therefore, in my understanding of the opera Norse production, the role of the supernatural is neither simply one of the elements of the ghost story, nor simply one of the parts of the ambiguity between the supernatural and the hallucination of the governess. Rather, the ghost and the governess can exist at the same time, and the combination of the supernatural and the governess behaviors on stage generates a sharper and more serious angle that draws our attention to the traumatized children. Since the premiere of the production of the opera, scholars and audience have speculated on its meaning. They debated the narrative content and the music of the work itself and whether the ghosts exist. Then attention moved from the stage of do the ghosts really exist to the stage of two contradictory possibilities. In recent years, directors of new productions stopped grappling with whether ghosts really exist or the psychological problems of the governors. They give themselves the opportunity to delve deeper into Benjamin Britten's musical structure and give the opera more space to be interpreted. Yeah, thank you for listening.